Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Mala Sudha Kumbha Vibodha Mudra Vidya Virajat Karavarijata Apara Karunya Sudhamburashim Shri Sharadambam Pranatosmi Nityam Shankarupena Marchittam Pankekatamabudhyaya Kinkarigasya Samaya Shankaracharyamashaye Prahladavarado Devo Yonusammah Paro Harihi Nisummopasakam Nityam Tam Nisimma Gurum Bhaje Shri Satchidananda Shiva Abhinavya Bharatya Pitan Yati Indran Vidyanidhin Mantranidhin Sadatmanishtan Bhaje Manava Shambhurupan Sadatmatyana Niratam Vishayepya Paran Mukam Naumi Shastreshu Nishnatam Chandrasekhara Bharati Vivekinam Mahapragyam Dhairyodharatkshamanidhim Sadabhinavapurvam Tam Vidyatirtha Gurum Bhaje Ajnanam Jannavitirtam Vidyatirtam Vivekinam Sarvesham Shukatam Tirtham Bharati Tirthamashraye Vidya Vinaya Sampannam Vitaragam Vivekinam Vande Vedanta Tatvekyam Vidushekara Bharati. Namaskaram to all of you. At the outset, I thank the Shringeri Guru Badava channel, Jnananda Bhati Swamigal Trust, and Shankar in person for this valuable opportunity to give a short talk on one of the masterpieces of Sri Jnananda Bhati Swamigal's works, Thoughts from the Gita, as part of his Aradhana. Was blessed with the good fortune of delivering a two-part talk on Thoughts from Gita during Swamigal's Jayanti last year, November, and thought that it would be befitting if we can do a part 3 talk on Thoughts from Gita, this time dealing with Karma Yoga. Swamigal, within 32 pages, has compressed and has elucidated what Karma Yoga is for persons like us who are neither fully evolved or fully into material world, and is finding the time and opportunity and means to progress in the path of transformation. This text of 145 pages gives you the quintessence for any earnest seeker of Vedanta to know what Bhagavan Shri Krishna has said in the Bhagavad Gita. When Swamigal deals with Karma Yoga, he puts it in a capsule by first trying to explain the two well-known and broad concepts, namely the self, which is the truth, and the nature, which is the illusion. And goes on to say, the whole purpose of one's life journey as a human being is to recognize this distinction between truth, which is self or Brahman, and nature, which is the non-self or the illusion. And proceeds to say, the problem all of us are caught into is making an alloy of both as a combined or as a combination. The moment we combine illusion and truth, then Gita says, sense of doership becomes inevitable. The source of doership, which sometimes we call it as I, sometimes we call it as the ego, which Swamigal puts it as doership. When truth and illusion gets mixed up as one inseparable entity, as one composite form in our belief, that's the source or the seed for the sense of doership. And the purpose of Karma Yoga, which is elementary, Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, allows you to reduce the potency of this doership. It slowly and steadily dilutes the sense of doership. So that the mind, which is the source seed of all actions, is emptied and remains purified. This is the quintessence of Karma Yoga. And Swamigal, being an advocate in his Purvashrama, has his inevitable style in communicating things without mincing words. He goes on to say, look here, the journey is isolating self from nature, isolating truth from illusion. It's not a journey of coordination or subordination. It's a journey of separation. That's how he puts it in this book. The question is, how do you separate it? At a conceptual plank, at a theoretical plank, it is certainly understandable that this is what one intends to do or one should do. But how is the question. So he takes mind, he actually defines it as nature because it's a slightly broader concept than even mind. But for our convenience, sometimes let me be permitted to use the expression mind also. But Swamigal consistently uses the expression only nature, which is nothing but a bundle of impressions which act upon us, which makes us to act. So, he broadly classifies nature into three parts for our understanding. When we get swayed away, saying that I just can't control, Things happen beyond me. I get swayed away. I just get carried away. Even if I want to stop, I'm unable to stop. It happens as a matter of instantaneous response, reaction, or reflex. He calls them as natural activity. When you are able to regulate nature and make it do things which is congenial to you, then he calls it as a congenial activity. If you are strong enough and has the willpower to stand up, fight and suppress nature, then he calls those actions as forced activity. So these are the three states in which we can broadly operate. Either you are under the influence or control of nature and it takes you, sways you away. You may be under the influence of nature, but you will be able to regulate it. Your will is so strong, you are so bold, so courageous that you are able to stand up against and fight nature and suppress it. So these three conditions are inherent in human conduct and actions, says Thoughts from Gita. Now we go to the next step. If you take even this case of natural activity, the first category, before we go to congenial activity and forced activity. For a minute, think of your mind. Does it act, react, or respond instinctively to some things? So, being instinct is inherent to human nature as part of natural activity. Being instinctive. Being impulsive is again part of human conduct and human activity. And translating our impulses into willful actions is also part of human nature. When a snake bites, when someone is stung by a scorpion, what will he or she do? Instinctively, they will shake their hand. You don't have to apply your mind there. It doesn't respond based on mental impressions. It's so spontaneous, so reflexive, so instantaneous. So, this is part of human nature, being instinctive. The moment we shake our hands after being stung by a scorpion, that experience registers in our mind as an impulse. A mental impression gets recorded. So we begin to dislike it. This is part of natural activity. And what's the third response? we will make the attempts to kill the scorpion or kill the snake or drive the snake away. A strong resentment followed by a willful action. So, what do these three emotions generate out of us? Instinct allows you to act in such a way that how to avoid pain. Since it has caused pain already, the impulse, mental impressions creates an aversion. And whenever we see a scorpion or a snake in future, there is an expression of active dislike or even hatred, so as to avoid that experience. Happens also in the case of good things. Take the case of a mango. Seeing a fruit instinctively makes you reach it. Here you avoid pain. There you progress to enjoy pleasure. Here there is a resentment. There is a desirability. Here there is an active hatred. There is a strong, willful desire to translate desirability into actionable desires, fulfillment of the desires. Just expand it a little further. We just discussed one painful experience and another pleasurable experience. If we start gathering multiple mental impressions down to dusk throughout our lives, and impressions which we had inherited in the previous births, imagine what our nature would be. Our nature is nothing but one which carries bundle of mental impressions. Bundles and bundles and unfathomable bundles of mental impressions. Either they fall either as strong likes or strong dislikes, avoidance or gain, pain or pleasure. And the mind or the nature is always directed or focused towards the path of enjoying pleasures and avoiding pain. Is this not our nature? We just shared one experiences. Now it becomes bundle of experiences. And we keep sowing fresh, new seeds, thought after thought, action after action. Either wantonly or unwantedly, deliberately or not so. But this is a never-ending, continuous cyclic process. So what happens? Our nature inherits, accumulates, and keeps sowing fresh seeds of building mental impressions. When all these three starts consolidating in a human mind, in a human body, in a human thought, in a human action, then at some point of time, it starts dictating us as to what we are supposed to do. And we keep saying, I am doing all this in spite of myself. How many times we have done it? You may not really want to do something, but you'll still be doing it. Why? Because of these impressions don't disappear. They don't get banished. And we are making no attempts to prevent its recurrence. We have inherited, we keep doing actions, develop mental impressions, and as we gather new mental impressions, we don't prevent future recurrences of fresh set of mental impressions. And this is what we call it as karma bandha, bondage, eternal bondage, gets chained, unable to get out of it, gets sunk into it. And the process of pleasure and pain follows one after the other. Without a gap, without an interruption. And our attempt will always be to avoid pain and go after pleasure. And therefore, Gita teaches us what you can do to build and make yourself as a karma yogi. So these three states, being instinctive, either you want or you avoid. Being impulsive, remaining in a steady state of desirability or undesirability, and translating your impulses into willful actions by going in search of pleasure and avoiding pain. Results more and more of karma bandha. So Gita teaches you, okay, let's clean the slate, let's remain actionless, let's not do anything from today, and we have all become yogis, is simply not possible. Why? Why it's not possible? We should understand it conceptually. These are all not statements. These are all proofs. Can you stop suddenly something of what you've been doing for births? We remain unstoppable. Our actions, our desires, our aversions remain unstoppable. So, can you clean the slate overnight? Vedanta says you can't clean the slate overnight. So then what is the process? It's a two-step process, broadly. Step 1, clean the impressions and prevent fresh impressions to get deposited in your mind. Clean the impressions. The accumulated mental impressions should be cleaned. Fresh impressions should be prevented. This is step 1. Step 2. If you have cleaned your impressions and you have developed a capability to prevent fresh impressions to gather, then a spiritual guru will be in a position to lead you into the path of enlightenment, of dissolving your very nature. Cleaning the mind, purifying the mind is step one. Then, when divine grace falls on such a purified mind, then it leads you into the path of emancipation, of destroying, killing, or dissolving the mind. Mind doesn't exist at all. These are the two steps. Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga enables you to reach the first step. It cleans up your mind. It purifies your mind. What is purification of mind? It is emptying the mind. A pot of water. Step 1, empty the pot of water. Step 2, break the pot. Therefore, there is no future chance for it to gather water. So, step 2 is achieved through the margas of yoga and jnana. And that's why Gita speaks about all these 4 margas. So, how do you become a karma yogi? What are the qualifications? Step 1. 2 things are inevitable for every starter. We have not given up the sense of doership. We have to start from there. Sense of doership is part or inherent to us. And mind, which carries bundles of impressions, remains unstoppable, and therefore it will keep acting. Mind stops only when we sleep. So it cannot be stopped. Flow of actions remains unstoppable, and we carry the sense of doership in those flow of actions in an uninterrupted, continuous manner. So Karma Yoga teaches us the following steps to be carried out one after the other, as a slow but a steady process. It says, because you cannot stop actions, nor can you give up doership. So get into the path of regulating the work or the actions you perform. So you must regulate. All right. We understand it conceptually. Yeah, we should regulate. That's good for us. But how? Therefore, Gita speaks about identify your nature, find out what gives you the best mode to practice your nature, and start regulating it. God gives each one of us a nature. based on our punya and papa, based on our merit carried or inherited over millions of births. So, take that and start regulating. All right. What are the first step for regulation? See, remember this chain of actions. What are the chain of actions? Aspiration, leading to desirability, then translating the desire into action, enjoying the action actively, building up fresh mental impressions, and the process is continuous. And Gita says this happens to us. Why? Because we are in a state of being unconsciously passive by nature. This is happening every second. Are we monitoring ourselves? Are we following it ourselves? We don't do it. So we remain unconsciously passive. So the first step towards regulation is, it may look theoretical, but we have to start somewhere. So where do we start? Gita teaches us the first step. From being unconsciously passive, become consciously passive, because you can't stop your actions. Go and suddenly arrest your actions. That can happen 1 in a trillion. The rarest of rare can do, where you can force your activity against nature. So we are not talking about that exceptional cases. We are talking about nature which is regulated or congenial. So what is the difference between being unconsciously passive and consciously passive? The first step is following your actions. Become conscious that your mental impressions are acting on you continuously. From allowing, because if you allow, then over a period of time it sways you. You become non-stoppable. Prevention doesn't happen. So for the process to reverse, the first elementary foundational step is, instead of allowing it to be unconscious, start watching it as consciously passive. Easy to say, impossible to practice. We may do 1 second initially in 1 month. 2 times a month. Few times a month. Few times a week. Few times a day. This is how we start building the practice. First is awareness. Being aware of the steps to be taken. So, can you become conscious of what is happening to you? Is the first possible. Then the second step is, after all, you can't stop actions because nature is powerful. It will act the way it wants to. So, can you, at that stage, can we attempt to become slightly unselfish or selfless? First stage is to follow the action consciously. When this gets into our practice, we will know that this is right and this is wrong and this is what is happening to us. So it leads you to the second stage. I want this, I want that, I have to somehow secure it. The self-centeredness will start to loosen little by little. So it takes you to the next step. You will continue to work. You can't prevent it. You'll continue to act. You can't be prevented. But you will act without a selfish motive slowly. If we move into this path, then it leads you to the third stage. The more and more you become selfless, it will make you vigorous, slowly but steadily, to give up the fruits of what you want to do. In all these three stages, we continue to act. Please remember that. That's Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is not sitting quiet in isolation. Karma Yoga is not withdrawing from work. Karma Yoga is not running away from life. Whatever we do, it's a mirror, an inverted mirror. It wants us to invert our actions and conduct. Take the 3 steps again. What are we doing today? We unconsciously keep acting every second. We continuously go search of work and actions which gives us pleasure to meet our selfish ends. And all our actions are pointed out towards a goal or a destination to somehow achieve what we want to achieve. Then you may ask a question, are you saying Karma Yoga is a clueless life, a mindless life, a reckless life, a useless life? Is that what you want us to do by saying you act and just give up everything? No. Karma Yoga does not discourage or dissuade you from not acting, because it starts with the premise actions cannot be prevented. Doership cannot be prevented. It starts with that foundation. But recognize that you are a doer. Then comes the stage of giving up doership. Start cognizing the fact that you are the doer. Once we start to cognize this, it will lead us to the next 2 steps. It will make us selfless slowly. The same work. If you are, say, a professional, what will be your goal? Constantly sweat towards success. Constantly fix targets to achieve it. And constantly become desperate to see that you somehow you are your own competitor. You can have the same goals as a Karma Yogi, but you don't have to perspire. You fix the goals which are noble and good, rather than fixing goals which will make you achieve it by through hook or crook. And once you are able to fix your goals, your targets, and work hard towards your targets, knowing and realizing the fact whenever possible that you can only own your work and not your results. Gita assures you, look here, young man, look here, young girl. A karma yogi remains in action constantly and performs better actions than one who is bound by karmas. Between one who is caught up in karmas and one who is a practitioner of karma yogi, both do the same work. One gets into the quagmire of the cycles of desires and non-desires, aversions and avoidance, pain, pleasure. Whereas the other man remains in complete action but control over it. Both are performing work. This is something which we need to carry in our mind very clearly, because all of us are young. All of us are active. All of us wants to achieve, perform so many things. But there is a way to do it. And Gita teaches you the way to do it. So if you do these three, recognize that you are doing, do it selflessly, and do it without expectations of the outcome, which is not in your hands. You own your work, you own your effort, but you don't own your results because somebody has to give it to you. It's a combination of the invisible and the visible. This is something which we will deliberate on some other occasion in a very, very detailed way. It's something which we should know. How does this combination work? We'll talk about it on some other occasion. But remember that it's a fact which all of us have to accept. Otherwise, every time when you act, you have to get the same result. Everyone should get the same result. No, nobody gets the same result every time. And everybody doesn't get the same result every time. Some get it, some don't get it. Some get it on an average basis. Some get it low, some get it high. So there is variation in the outcome in spite of the same level of efforts. So there is a mix of visible and invisible forces to it. At the moment, let's park it there. So if you do these three, doership, being conscious of the doership, then do it selflessly and do it without expectation. Karma Yoga tells you it will lead you into the path of non-attachment. And non-attachment leads you to the path of non-expectations. So remember the 5 steps: doership, being conscious, selfless, not ready, not expecting the results, leads you to non-attachment and leads you to a stage of non-expectations. So where does this lead to? It leads you first in preventing fresh mental impressions to get gathered as becoming impulses. You will be performing a work in which you have no attachment. You will be performing a work in an exceedingly great fashion with no expectations. Things will happen because you are putting effort. Then this leads you where, one, it prevents fresh seeds of mental impressions to get deposited. Because no expectations. Second, it starts to empty the mental impression. Every action, even physics says so, every action has a counteraction. Every action has a consequence. Every cause has an effect. So, if you do it as a with a karma bandha as in mind, it leads you to sow fresh impressions and gather fresh Eating a mango, keep enjoying it every time as you eat. You build fresh impressions. It gives you more and more. That desire never gets exhausted in your life. Know that you are eating a mango. Just know that you are eating a mango. And then don't somehow go in search of it mentally. If it comes your way, we will eat it. Let's not go in search of it. And as you eat, if we are able to think, look here, this has come to us as a gift of God. But how long can this be coming to us? And why should it be coming to us again and again? Practitioner says it will lead you to this state. You are talking of a mango. This happens to a workaholic. He will or she will keep working relentlessly with no selfish motives, with no selfish drive. It's like an engine which keeps moving on its own pace without effort, without any motive power. It keeps moving. How smooth it will be. A river keeps moving, and a mechanical engine propels because of energy being infused. A river flows mellifluously. Is there not a difference in nature? All of us can turn into a river, because flow of a river is unstoppable, but it can be regulated. So this non-attachment and non-expectations leads us to a state where we lose interest. And when you say lose interest, the drive to create more and more fresh impression. Hey, let's exhaust. Doing it with bandha extends your desire levels. Doing it as a yoga extinguishes your actions. So we will start emptying our mental impressions. It's a beautiful process. And human birth is empowered, capacitated to do that, says Gita. Especially when you have a guru who can take you there. Same effort starts unbundling you, unfurling you, emptying you, leads to the purity of mind. So continuously perform work this way leads to the purity of mind. So we have reached step 1, called Karma Yoga. So what happens to a mind which is pure? A guru introduces to such a mind which is pure to Vairagya and Abhyasa. What is Vairagya? See, Karma Yoga leads you to the state of non-desirability. There will be mental impressions, but you will not gather fresh desires into it. Vairagya, which results in non-attachment, expectations, transforms you from a state of non-desire to no desire. That's the power of Guru's grace. If he blesses an aspirant with Vairagya, such a person can translate himself or herself from a state of non-desire to a state of no desire. Abhyasa, is a condition where a mind, you start weaning the mental impressions through Karma Yoga, stilling it through the process of Vairagya, but it still oscillates. So, when constantly practiced as an abhyasa, we had two things. We had a mind and we filled it with lot of mental impressions. We have a pot, we filled it with water. What does Karma Yoga do? Karma Yoga ensures water is drained out, mental impressions are drained out, so that pot remains empty, mind remains empty and pure. Vairagya stills it. It ensures the pot no longer is able to receive water. And the mind remains uninfluenced to fresh thoughts, fresh actions, fresh desires, fresh seedings into it. An abhyasa leads you to a state. See, this is what you call it through the practice of yoga or through the path of jnana, based on the capacity of each aspirant. When you say yoga in our Buddhavali, are we not referring to the Ashtanga yogas? Yamane yamasana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadhi ashtanga yoga anushtana tapaschakravarti. We say that, and we rever our gurus every day in the morning prayer. And whenever we offer our obeisance to our gurus, we chant this. So breath control, mind control, body control, all this comes one after the other. All these processes ultimately leads you to dissolution of the mind or the destruction of the mind. Emptying the process is yoga, karma yoga. Destroying the mind is through jnana or through yoga, dhyana. In 35 pages, Swamigal captures the quintessence of Karma Yoga. In just 35 pages. With very apt illustrations for any beginner to easily comprehend it. See, by listening we don't transform. We transform only through Guru's grace. But by coming into contact with these spiritual truths, and if we are destined and we are blessed, we will start our initial practice sporadically here and there. But one request I do make to you out of my own personal experience. In case you start getting good spiritual guidance, then we must somehow find some time for ourselves to pursue that into actions. Otherwise, it's like a huge tank capable of receiving water, but there is a huge hole there, the other end of the tank. All that will go out. So, some time we should find to ourselves to practice. And we should stay connected to these truths intimately and whenever possible. And 3, never ever attempt to accumulate knowledge on Vedanta with pride. It's simply useless. Acquisition of Vedantic knowledge on Vedanta is only to gain and translate that into experience. This conviction is very, very crucial. This book will drive you to get that conviction. I'm saying all this only to say the way Sri Jnananda Bharati Swami has written this book. See, he has been a practitioner of whatever he has been speaking. It reflects in his book. It is, when you read it, you will not find it theoretical. That is the difference between a writer who has theoretical knowledge and a practitioner who translates his practice into a book. A practitioner's book is nothing but sharing experience. And therefore it will impact. And hence the request to each one of you to kindly read Thoughts from the Gita. It's just 140 pages. Take your time, but read it. And in 30 pages, somebody can give the essence of Karma Yoga. And what more do we expect? With the non-availability of time, with ever so many impediments and constraints in which we confront our daily routines. This is the best Swamiji has taught 50 years back. Knowing fully well in 2022 we will be struggling, and has given us this book. And therefore I would sincerely request you to buy this copy and go through it and undergo the experience of first reading it. You will hear the voice of Swamiji. All his writings are in talking language. That's the greatness and richness of his books and his writings. Once again, thank Shingeri Guru Bandhava channel, our Jnananda Bharati Swamigal Trust, and Shankar in person. More importantly, a person who had no idea of what Vedanta is. Sri Jnananda Bharati Swami has been very compassionate in permitting me to repeatedly claim that he is my Manasika Vedanta Guru. Whatever spoken, if it is right, it's only because of him and the pure divine grace of Acharyas. If something is wrong, then it's my inefficiency, and I therefore apologize for that. But every devotee of Acharya should go through his works. Splendid they are both in Tamil, English, and also in Sanskrit. Whoever has the capacity to read all three. If not one who can read English, if not both who can read English and Tamil, don't lose this opportunity. I once again dedicate this few humble words at the lotus feet of our revered Mahasannidhanam, Jagadguru Shri Bharati Tirtha Mahaswamigal, and our revered Sannidhanam, Jagadguru Shri Vidushekara Bharati Swamigal. Pranams. Namaste.